Thank you very much, Cheryl, for that much appreciated introduction. And it has been 10 or 12 years now. And let me say good morning to my friends and supporters, and thank you individually and collectively for coming out again. And I hate to have to confess this public, but I love you all just tremendously. I just love you. And I do, and I think about you all the time, and I'm especially indebted to the Price family, to Betty and Fred, and to Cheryl and Angela, because I'll tell you all honestly, if it had not been for Fred, we would have folded up the Harvest Institute 10 years ago. But Fred and Betty and the congregation here at Crenshaw has been extremely supportive. They have never missed any opportunities to help us financially and keep us going. Now, we have never raised one penny from any whites. We've been staying in business strictly based on the contributions of black folk. And we've been recognized for putting out the best newsletters in the United States, black or whites. And we put them out, most of them about 20-some pages thick. And the whole point of the Harvest Institute is to look at issues and approaching black folk, analyze them for you, and give you how-to strategies to deal with the common problems. Nobody else in the country does that for black folk except us. But we do it off of pennies, and we're running against over 5,000 white think tanks in the country. And the only other comparative institutions for blacks would be something like the Joint Center, but that's for minorities, not for black folk. We are strictly devoted to the educational and political and economic empowerment of black people. We don't get into the thing about minorities, poor folk, people of color, humpbacks, midgets, lesbians, and that kind of stuff. Just black folk. And we just love black folk. And so, we did try to get money from a couple of institutions at one time, and they told us that they would give us money. That's everything from Sally Mae to Sunoco Oil and Pizza Hut and the rest of them. They said, if you were to do one thing for us, we said, what's that? They said, take the emphasis off of black folk and put it on minority women and children. We'll give you money every year. And I said, we'll just keep going the way we're going with a few pennies for black folk, okay? But we do love you, and today, again, we're here in celebration of the Black History Month, as you know. And so some of the things I'm going to say today, again, I want to point out to you, it is not that I'm against anybody. I'm not against any other group. And I want you all to understand that real clear now, that just because you're interested in your own people, just because you prioritize their welfare, does not mean you're against other groups. But I always got somebody coming up telling me about, well, Dr. Anderson, if you're only concerned about black folk, you're prejudiced against other groups. No, I'm not a prejudice against anybody. Amen. But I hear that all the time. And you got some guy, some clown running around the country calling himself the black commentator. And he always criticized, well, Dr. Anderson is prejudiced, he only focuses on black folk. And he always says that black folk are not progressing, he's ignorant of facts. Black folks are doing extremely well all over the country. Where are they doing well? I want to know. I'm all over this country. Every day I'm almost in a different city dealing with black folk. Where's all this black progress? I want to know about it. Someone says, well, you know, we're doing well. Well, today we're going to talk about how well we are doing and see if we're really doing well. And so I'll be talking about black history this morning. Two things, black history itself and the power of blackness. That's what we're going to focus on. And contrary to what anybody tells you in this country, black folk are not doing well. And we're not doing well even though the history books have never pointed it out. You see, in this country, whites historically and systematically excluded blacks from everything. We never showed up in the history books until the 1960s, and since the 1960s, we started showing up twice. That's either that we are picking cotton in slavery, or we are riding and demonstrating in the 1960s during the black civil rights movement. That's the only two times, and usually they give you about 3 lines to explain those two things. And so black history is extremely important to us. And I have a lot of people going around saying, Dr. Anderson, you got to quit talking about black history. Black folk can't live in the past. Yes, you can. It is impossible for you to live in anything but the past. You cannot live in the present. You cannot live in the future. And quit letting people trick you into believing that somehow you can live in the present, live in the future. It is impossible. Everything you do is past. Now, since I've been talking, you've been living, you're already the past. My hand right now is here. That's already gone into the past 2 seconds ago. When you leave this auditorium, you function off of the past. You first thing you're going to say is that, which door did I come into? How do I get back home based on the past? Where is my car? Where did I park it? That's the past. How do I start that car? That's the past. Where are my keys? That's the past. Everything you do is the past. If you don't understand the past, you'll never understand the present or the future. Because those things do not really exist. They're so fleeting. You cannot live in the future. And I want you all to understand the importance of the past. That's why I've tried to popularize black history and to popularize the importance of the past for black folk now for 30-some years. And don't let people criticize you about living in the past. That's the only way you can live. And since you've been here for the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes, that's the past. But we find people all over this country that seemingly don't understand the importance of it. And I want to use an instance. When I talk about instance, when I talk about Reverend Martin Luther King, back in 1963, when he made this statement, free at last, thank God I'm free at last. I want to say, free at last from what? To do what? Now, apparently, Dr. Martin Luther King was talking about free from white oppression or white abuse or white superiority. I'm sure that's what he was alluding to. But in reality, black folk are not free from anything. You are just as impoverished today, just as powerless, just as disorganized as you were in 1860 on the eve of the Civil War. You have not moved not one iota in 140 years. All you're doing is enjoying the fruits of a social illusion. Because people keep telling you what's going on socially. They tend to equate social access as being progress. That all of a sudden now we got progress because we have access to the white community. That now our kids have access and being bused to white schools. Because now we got access to white community, to businesses. We got white access. But that is not progress. That's not progress. And we don't understand history enough to understand the difference. Whites don't know anything about history because I said they've always avoided it. Most blacks don't know anything about black history because they've been socially conditioned to think that somehow symbolism and personalities is black history. They think that every February, when you put up those same 10 or 15 pictures, that's black history. And you all know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. It tells a black child absolutely nothing. Those are just simply visible blacks that happen to have lived at one time on earth. It doesn't tell you anything about black history. Let's project ourselves into the future a second. Let's pretend right now that 10 years from now, in this room, that all of a sudden I were to place pictures on the wall of blacks that are visible today. Suppose in 10 years from now I put up the picture of Tiger Woods, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, Bill Cosby, Oprah, and Clarence Thomas, and say that's black history. You're going to say, you should be saying, what? Ward Conley, any of them. How does that translate to helping black folk? What did they do for black folk? Just because they were running with a ball or dancing, Michael Jackson, how did that get to be black history? Nobody else on earth does that but us. You don't see any white folk running pictures of white entertainers or white athletes in their history books. Or running white millionaires in the history book about how much money they made. Only we would go back and do that. And all of a sudden, so I said, this is black history because this black has a lot of money, or this one can dance and sing, or this one can run with a football, or he was the first black. Nobody ever says, how did they take what they achieved and translate it into being black folk? Never happened. And that's where black history falls down. And see, we had the same thing with George Washington Carver, who was a tremendously smart black man in Alabama, invented 257 products, commercial products, everything from lipstick. He took the peanut and the sweet potato and made 257 commercial products, but he didn't give one of them to black folk. All the things he invented, products that he produced, went to whites and the white institutions. Nothing came down to black folk to be benefited from his products. And you look at all those 10 or 15 pictures every Black History Month, find out what translated down to black folk. What came down to black folk by telling them this was the first black here and the first black there? What did it do for black folk? And see, that's the problem. And we got to understand that the problem is we live in a society now where everybody thinks that any progress away from blackness towards whiteness is beneficial. And what they've done now is crafted two kinds of blacks in history and in the present term. That's a good black and a bad black. And in history, there was two kinds of black, a good black and a bad black. And when Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a book in 1851 to be more specific, that's what she was talking about when she wrote the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was portraying two kinds of blacks, a good black and a bad black. Now watch this, watch the trickery. Now she wrote that book talking about Uncle Tom's Cabin, and Uncle Tom, who was a leading black on a plantation, working under Simon Legree, the white slave master. Now, how whites define good blacks and bad blacks is this. A good black is a passive black, a compromising black, an acquiescing black, a non-threatening black, a black who's committed to moving away from his people and towards whites and being white. That's a good black all through history. It's still in force and in effect today. A bad black is a black that says, I'm a special person. I don't have to take free posterior whippings, and I won't take them. I will stand up and protect my people in every instance. And in that novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, that's what happened with Uncle Tom. See, Uncle Tom was a black that stood up for his people. Most blacks never read the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. If you read Uncle Tom's Cabin, here's what you find. Uncle Tom was a very weak black. He was a weak man. And he understood that. He was an enslaved black. And he was a leading black on the plantation. And in the book, he was overly religious at times. But one thing he did, he maintained his principles. He said, there's certain things I will not do. I will not brutalize, mistreat my people. And that's what Simon Legree, the slave master, wanted him to do, was to beat up on his people. He wanted him to increase the amount of quotas, on cotton picking quotas from black females. He wanted to beat black females when they didn't bring in enough cotton. He wanted Uncle Tom to squeal on blacks that were contemplating running away or trying to plan some kind of revolt. And what Uncle Tom would do instead was when the rest of the slaves came in the evening, he would take cotton out of his own sack and stick into the sack of other blacks to make sure they didn't get whippings and beatings. He protected them. But Simon Legree didn't want that. See, when he started doing that, he was no longer a good black. And what he wanted then, he wanted him to be the black that would come after and beat up on his own people. And he wanted him also to confess that, no, I'm your Lord and master on this earth, and you're going to do what I tell you to do. And Uncle Tom says, I'll die first. And all through history, and I was in the Marine Corps as a safety and survival engineer, you cannot be the people that say, I'll die first before I do what you want me to do. Can't be done. That's why we couldn't win in Vietnam or in Korea. You cannot control the people that don't mind dying for what they believe in. And so Uncle Tom said, I'm not going to go along with that. And so Simon Legree says, then Sambo, I want you to come in here every night and beat Uncle Tom until he understands that I am his master, and he's got to do what I tell him to do in terms of how he treats black folk. And so Sambo would come in on a regular basis, would sometimes bring gumbo with him. And they would beat Uncle Tom until finally they beat him to death. And then when whites got hold to the story, by the 1940s, they switched it around on you. They switched it to where Uncle Tom became the clown and the weak guy. Not only a weak in terms of being in submission as a slave, but just weak in their belief in his own people. And so Uncle Tom then started in the 1940s to become a bad label for black folk. And everybody forgot about Sambo. And see, in our times today, the bad guy is not Uncle Tom. The bad guy is Sambo. Sambo is the black that's always getting in a position to where he can get personal rewards and benefits and beat up on his own people. And right now in all levels of government, in state government, city government, county government, and federal government, you got Sambos sitting in office beating up on their own people. And I don't want you all calling anybody an Uncle Tom anymore when he's really a Sambo. You call him by his appropriate and proper name. And today, we need to start focusing on going back and like he was saying, nothing wrong with being black. The only problem with blackness is not the color, it's our condition. See, because we don't own and control anything in the society. That's why everybody beats up on us. But I'm here to tell you today that blackness has always had power. Every time you move away from blackness, you get weaker. You get weaker. And don't let anybody move you away from blackness. Because right now that we got a national public policy in this country called benign neglect that President Nixon put into place in 1970. And based on the Daniel Moynihan memo saying the way you quieten black folks down and kill off the black movement in this country is to take the focus off of black folk and put it on minority women and children. And they did it very successfully, and we began to disappear. And now all of our black leadership went along with it. They didn't stand and say, hold on a second, you can't take the emphasis off of black folk. You cannot equate black folk to women, children, and minorities. They have never enjoyed the same treatment in this country. But they went along with it. And so black folk then went under national public policy of benign neglect. And we began to drift apart and weaken and watered down to where now we're nothing but an obsolete labor class, powerless. Nobody cares about us. You've got to go back to blackness. And I've been telling people for years that there's a special power in blackness. And now it's beginning to come out in study after study after study by universities telling me the same thing that I've been saying to black folk for 30 years. We just got recent reports that came through that says that now, based on DNA studies in genomes and SNPs and studying and breaking down the gene structure of the human tissue, they found out some things that I've been saying and believing for centuries. That in there they found out that in the genetic structure of African blacks, that they got the highest concentration of all the basic elements of life in their system that nobody else has. And they found out in tracking the DNA genes around the world that the further you get away from Africa, the weaker the human being becomes. They traced it and found out that when they moved from Africa to Europe, that whites began to break down in their structure. They looked at the structure. They say as they move, they lose the diversity. The diversity and concentration of the genetic structure breaks down when you move away from Africa. And they say and that meant that in this country, that European whites that claim to be so superior that they're weaker than the blacks in Africa. And secondly, they say that everything that human beings were given with the founding of the earth and going all the way back in history, whether secularly or biblically, is in the structure of black Africans and nobody else. They showed that through genetic tracking and archaeological studies and findings, that the original human beings came right out of Africa. Then they moved east into Asia, and they moved north into Europe, And then they crossed the Bering Straits into the United States and came down through the Americas. When I hear black, I go on a radio station, I hear people tell me, well, Dr. Anderson, you're beating up on the Hispanics. Hispanics are here for blacks. They were not. Black folk were the first people on earth. And they came in this country way before anybody else. And these studies are also saying that in the tissue and the genetic structure of blacks in the heart of Africa, that they have a greater power to fight off diseases than any other people. And just in the melanin alone in the skin, as our environment breaks down and we lose our blockages for sun rays coming in on the earth, that white's going to be very vulnerable now to skin cancer. Blacks have the melanin in their skin to protect them coming right out of Africa. And these studies are very popular. And what they're saying now, but they've never gone over into the popular media. The popular media won't bring these up and discuss it. These are studies coming out of Harvard and MIT saying that we've tracked it down that blacks in Africa have all the basic diversity that exists in human beings and all the protective characteristics in black folk. And even more than that, that shows you there's power in blackness. But they just recently invented a paper-thin material that is black, that is so powerful that it can suck up whiteness and light all around it. It is so powerful now, and this just came out within the last 2 or 3 weeks. It is so powerful, they invented this material that anything that goes inside of it, any light that goes inside of it, never comes out. They figured that soon they'd be able to take this same material and be able to wrap anything into it, and whatever's in there will disappear because of the power of blackness. They understand through astrology that off in the universe, that what they call black holes that are so powerful that it's frightening to astrologists. They know out there there's something called black holes in space, that not only does it exist, but they can feel rhythms from it and vibrations from it of power that is frightening even to the astronauts. So if you believe in a God being in the space in the universe, could that be him? And I track it down and go back to the Bible. And when it says, in the beginning, there was God. And he decided to make man in his image. Now, let's do a little thinking for a second. If black folk were the first people on earth, y'all follow me? And God decided to make man in his image, and the first person he made was in his image, and the first person on earth was black, then what does that tell you? There is a direct connection between blackness and power in the universe and in all respects. And also, if God then had chosen black folk to be in his image, he says, I gotta place them someplace. Something that I would be akin to, that I could relate to, since they are my offsprings. Where did he place them? He placed them in Africa. He did not place them in Europe. He did not place them in Canada and Mexico. He placed them in Africa. Then he said, not only if I place them in Africa and they're in my image, I got an obligation to look out for that which I produce that looks like me, that has my qualities. And so what he did, he made Africa the richest continent on the earth. Then he said, and if I'm going to do that for the power, I don't want everybody picking on my black folk. So then he made a whole color spectrum that came out of blackness. See, whites cannot produce a color spectrum. Only blackness can produce a color spectrum. And then he sees black people. And he looked at the color and said, now, if they are mine, then I want my color to be dominant. Of all the color that you can find in the crayon system, yellow, green, purple, brown, any color you want, red, blackness will run over every color. Blackness will dominate any color. You can put red, pink, anything on black, and black will tear it up. And in addition to that, blackness is the fastest drying color in paint spectrum. I can put down colors of paint right now, red, pink, yellow, blue paint on a piece of wood. The black will harden faster. And not only will black harden faster, black is more durable. You cannot break it and get it off as easily. So in all respects, I keep telling y'all that blackness has power that we've never used. The problem is that we're under this Nixon's public policy of benign neglect. And black folk are running like crazy trying to get away from blackness and following whites to get away from blackness. Nobody wants to be black. Except maybe Claud Anderson. See, it doesn't bother me to be black. It ain't that bad when you get used to the pain. So I love it. And I tell black folk, now look around. And around the nation, and every black now is focusing on issues that get moved away from black folk. They want to be the good black, not the bad black. They want to move away from blackness and become a good black. They spend all their time and energy focusing on issues like diversity, multicultural, poor people, people of color, minorities, anything that doesn't have blackness in it. Anything that doesn't have blackness in it, blacks want to follow whites. And they don't know they're weakening themselves. And consequently, we get into major elections like the one we got going on right now. Everybody in the election is trying their best to get away from blackness. They don't want to be black. Nobody in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party wants to identify with blackness. And a lot of it started even under President Clinton. At that time, he and about 8 other senators created what they called the Democratic Leadership Council in the late 1980s. And the whole point of starting the Democratic Leadership Council was to get away from black folk. Because, see, Jesse Jackson had run for the presidency in 1984. And it pulled a lot of support away from the white man, Mondale. And in 1988, I'm serving as a primary person for planning the Democratic Convention in 98, and I'm down in Atlanta, Georgia. And so they created the Democratic Leadership Council saying, now let's move the Democratic Party away from Jesse Jackson and Sister Soldier and anything else that's black. And now let's become what we call progressive or moderate Democrats to get away from black folk. And they moved it to the center. And they say, even if that way we move it to the center and closer to the Republican Party, then we can bring back whites back into the Democratic Party. And our silly people, they said, well, we'll follow y'all wherever y'all want to go. So even though y'all want to get away from us and blackness, we'll go with y'all. So they moved over and followed the Democratic Party right on over. I'm heading up the Democratic Convention in 88. Here they come. Right on over to, we don't mind 2 Republican parties. And they followed it over. And now we look at the presidential election. Everybody's talking about issues, but nobody's going to talk about black folk. Not in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Why? Because in this society, blackness is bad. There's a fear of blackness. They're just as fearful of blackness on earth as they are that blackness in the universe, those dark holes. They don't know what it means. And so consequently, rather, they're fearful of a bad black. They'd rather have a good black. And so blacks like Clarence Thomas can get it put in the Supreme Court. You can put Condoleezza Rice in the White House. You can put Colin Powell as Secretary of State. And you can elevate blacks to every position. You can give them all the Academy Awards because those are safe blacks. Those are not bad blacks. And so now, when Obama is running for office, now the problem that Obama has, and I'll see if I'm going to vote, and I don't vote anymore. Y'all understand that? I don't vote anymore. I pulled out of the Democratic Party. I went independent. If I were voting, I would vote for Obama, but I would vote with the understanding that it's almost all symbolic, that he cannot do anything for black folk. They're not going to let him do anything for black folk. So he has to be 1,000 times safer than a birth control pill. So when Obama runs, what Obama's got to do now, Obama can't appeal to his base. Everybody in politics always will go to their base. He's running against Hillary. Hillary is going to her base. Just like all the conservative Republicans, they say we're conservatives. Conservative is a code word for anti-black. It started as a code word for anti-black. Conservatism comes from the root word to conserve. To conserve means to hold on to what one's got. Or as our mother used to say, that you who ain't got ain't gonna get. That's what conservatism means. So you hear white folks bragging about their conservatives, what they're saying is that you all who ain't got, you ain't gonna get. Now, we as black folk have never had anything. But you still have a lot of silly blacks running around the country calling themselves black conservatives. I want to ask them, what in the world are you conserving? What are you trying to conserve? Slavery, Jim Crow segregation, poverty, low-income housing, food stamps, welfare. What are you conserving, fool? But Dr. Alice, you don't understand. I'm a conservative. And so right now they're all trying to get away from blackness. Now Obama now, see, he's in a dilemma. And that's why I would support him. Because he cannot go to his base. Hillary can go to her base. Hillary can appeal to whites. And she can promise things to whites. Hillary can appeal to her gender. And she can promise things to her gender, to women's and women's issues. Hillary can pick surrogates. Either some conservative whites or some Sambo blacks to put them out there to go represent her. And you all got a lot of local ones around here. Now, see, I didn't say that. So they can go out there and represent her and push her opinion and make promises. Obama can't make any promises. He cannot go to the black community and say, if y'all vote for me, I'll do something for you. He cannot practice the basic premise of politics, which is called quid pro quo, something for something. One hand washes the other. If you vote for me, I owe you. Obama can't even practice politics in its truest sense. What he must do now is be a political albino. He must disengage himself from his color and be as white as snow. And he can't pick any blacks to go out and represent him. He can't pick, and I know a lot of black nationalists, he can't pick any black nationalists and say, hey, go out there and speak up for my people and tell them if I get in the office, I'm going to solve some of these problems. And the insulting part about it is that we live in a nation where the major problems and the economic damage is being inflicted on black folk, and nobody will speak up and cannot speak up. Right now in this nation, of all the problems they want to talk about, they're going to talk about health care or about the mortgage rates with the subprimes going down and creating situations where people losing their homes. They might talk about the Iraq war. But listen, in this society, the poverty for black folk in America is 38%. You got another third of the black folk in America that are right at the borderline of poverty. That means they were to lose their home, a little bit of money got in their homes and their car, and a little bit in a saving account, they would fall into their poverty level. You got an unemployment rate in America for black folk that is 35% nationally. Now the unemployment rate for whites is only 4.5. The unemployment rate for Hispanics is 4.6. The unemployment rate for Asians is 0. The unemployment rate for Arabs is 0. And yet you got an unemployment rate for black folk that's 35%. But nobody wants to identify with blackness. According to the national reports from the FBI, 67% of all the hate crimes in America are committed against black folk annually. Not against women and children, but against black folk. And yet, nobody makes an issue out of it. All the cases in the lawsuits, 98% of all the lawsuits being filed in the United States are filed on behalf of women, not of black folk. Even though 67% of all the hate crimes are against blacks. The unemployment rate in America, as I said, for black folk is 35%. In Detroit, it is 48%. In Baltimore, it's 48%. In Pittsburgh, it's 49%. In New York, for black males, it's 51%. For black youth, it's 87%. Nobody talks about those issues because those are black issues. You talk about businesses. Blacks now have less than 1/2 or 1% of the businesses. They got about, according to the record, they got about 700-some thousand black businesses in the United States. They don't tell you about 3/4 of those are nothing but consultantships. And that over 51% of all the black businesses in the United States don't even earn $10,000 a year in income. I'm telling you, you got major problems, but nobody wants to address them because they don't want to get near the blackness. And blacks that are in public office don't want to get near the blackness. Now here comes it. Now go to any major city and watch what happens. Since in 1960, we only had 103 elected black officials in the entire United States. Only 103. I looked at the social discomfort indicators in the United States in terms of welfare, food stamps, housing, imprisonment, all this kind, how it related to black folk. Looked at the conditions of black folk, dysfunctional schools and everything else. I looked at those conditions when blacks only had 103 elected officials in 1960. I looked at the same indicators in 1990, 30 years later. Why? Because by then, the number of elected black officials in the United States had gone up from 103 to over 9,000. That is a 9,000% increase in black elected officials. I looked at the conditions of black folk then, and guess what? The conditions didn't improve for black folk with a 9,000% increase. Guess what happened? The conditions got worse. Why? Because there's no relationship between putting a black person in office and black folk getting benefits over here. Now that is something that's only peculiar to black folk. Everybody else understands the rule of quid pro quo, something for something. If I put you in the office, you owe me. And yet, election after election, black folks are called to go out and vote and get nothing in return. Now, I had to speak in Waterloo, Iowa in December, right before the Iowa vote, and I was a keynote speaker out there. And they asked me, said, Dr. Black, I said, Dr. Anderson, of all these candidates running, which one would you support? I said, not one. I wouldn't give one of them the time of day. And they said, why? I said, because none of them promising me anything. Why am I going to go take off from work and go vote for somebody and get nothing? My mother taught me as a small child, don't play in any game that you can't win in. Why am I going to play if I can't win and can't get anything out of it? But we got a lot of black leaders all over the country that run games on black folk keep telling y'all, well, you gotta go vote because a lot of black gay their lives so that you can go vote. No black gay their lives for anybody to vote. They might have had their lives taken from them, trying to get benefits, but they didn't give their lives to anybody. They said, well, Dr. Anderson, well, don't you think blacks just go out and vote just to exercise their rights? No. If you want to exercise, go take out a membership at the Durham YMCA. Go jog around the park if you want to exercise. Only a fool would go to a voting booth to get exercise. You go to a voting booth to try to get some benefits. But they always run these games on us. So that way that we don't anticipate anything. So in our society now, every political candidate promises black folks nothing, and they give them nothing. And as I said, now I don't vote anymore, I pull out of it. But I don't discourage black folks to vote in this particular instance because I would like to see Obama win for the same reason black folks have been voting for people to win for 140 years, just symbolically. Feel good, inspirational. The next time y'all get hungry, you come to my house, rather than feeding you, I'm going to inspire you all. I'm going to wave a steak in the air. And if you're really nice to me, I'll take that steak and rub it upside your stomach, outside, to inspire and motivate you all. And see, that's when he played politics with us. See, we don't get anything. They're just symbolic victories. Make us feel good. You know, we'll vote for Doug Wilder to be the governor of Virginia. Blacks will break their necks trying to get him in the office. They get in there, they don't do anything with the black folk. And as I said, if somebody were to tell me right now, if I go down to a gambling casino here in L.A., and they tell me up front when I get to the door, I say, Dr. Anderson, you come on in now, that big roll of money you got that you just borrowed from Cheryl Price. And when you come in here, I guarantee you that the cards are marked, the dice are loaded, and the machine, the wheels are rigged. You ain't going to win a penny. Now, common sense would say, why am I going in there? So, so what do? You learn how to play the game in politics and go back to your base. Now, once this election is over, I want you all to start playing the game to win on blackness. You must always try to go to your blackness and concentrate your blackness like in Africa. Bring all your blackness back together again in power and strength. Rebuild your communities under powernomics principles and bring your strength there. And you vote in elections where you are the majority. If you're the minority, you're wasting your time. You're not going to get anything out of it. Now, let me give you, let's take Detroit, Michigan, and the recent reports from the Pew Foundation and U.S. Census. They showed them pretty clearly that they ranked all the cities, urban cities in the United States. The 10 poorest cities ranked 3 months ago in the entire United States. The 10 poorest cities, the 10 most dangerous cities, with the highest home foreclosure rates, with the highest high school dropout rates, with the highest imprisonment rates. Guess what they were? Cities where black folk are the majority populations. Detroit led the list in every category. And Detroit has 2 blacks in Congress. Blacks stuffed in large numbers into the state capitol. A black mayor. Black city council, black school board, black school superintendent, and 85% black population, and yet they lead the nation and everything is bad. Because I tell y'all, there's no connection between the blackness and the benefits. And that's why you all ask me why I pull out of my project out of Detroit. It's a waste of time. In most of these cities now, you got politically, criminally incompetent blacks sitting in office. They don't understand politics. They don't understand even the oath that they swear. When a person gets sworn to an office, they take an allegiance and says, I protect and serve those who put me into office. We live in a nation of representative government, which means you're supposed to represent the people that put you in the office. And see, but in this country, blacks in office won't do it. I can find blacks right now in the United States Congress, Congressional Black Caucus, that will not stick up for black folk. They're so busy taking care of everybody but black folk to put them in office. They don't even have enough sense to know that as soon as the other groups that they're supporting get strong enough, they're going to take them out of office. And that way black folk didn't get anything when they were in office. They don't get anything when they're out of office. Blacks in office won't do it. I can find blacks right now in the United States Congress, Congressional Black Caucus, that will not stick up for black folk. They're so busy taking care of everybody but black folk to put them in office. They don't even have enough sense to know that as soon as the other groups that they're supporting get strong enough, they're going to take them out of office. And that way black folk didn't get anything when they were in office. They don't get anything when they're out of office. And we're going to have to start playing the game and winning by not only putting blacks in the office who are responsible to us. Now, I was talking to one of the city council members in Detroit, Michigan, and she had said, put out a statement that in a city that's 85 to 90% black, that she was sick and tired of hearing about blackness, and that she was into multicultural and diversity. In a city that's 85 to 90% black, and Arabs own 90% of the businesses. And I called her down front and said, come here a minute. I said, why don't you represent the people that put you in office? We are a nation of representative government, which means you're supposed to represent those who send you to office. When whites send Strong Thurmond up from the South, Strong Thurmond comes to trying to represent black folk. Only people that want to represent everybody is black folk. Everybody else comes up there in Washington D.C. to represent their own people. I said, why don't you represent the people that put you in the office? Black folk put you in the office. Why don't you represent them? She said, Dr. Anderson, you just don't understand. I said, don't understand what, dear? She says, well, you don't understand. Black folk are their own welfare. They're always looking for handouts. They're begging all the time. They're on drugs. They're having illegitimate babies out of wedlocks, and they're just outright stupid. I said, well, let me tell you, if they're stupid enough to elect you to office, then you go downtown and represent them. You go downtown and represent stupid people. I said, if you live in a city where 85% of the population are midgets, and midgets elect you to office, go downtown and represent midgets. What's so hard about that? What's so hard about the blacks in this city and the blacks in Congress represent black folk that put them into offices? They find that difficult. I say it's simple. What they prefer to do is, again, get away from blackness. That's the game. And see, this has been going on all through history. Let me go back and show you how they started doing something early. Let's go back now to about late 1840s as an example. Now, at that time, when the Third Seminole War ended in Florida, what people didn't tell you that at that time, almost a third of all the people living in Florida were blacks. But what happened, though, those blacks were the ones that created the 3 Seminole Wars. They were being fought over black folk, black runaway slaves in Florida. There was no such thing as a Seminole Indian until black slaves started running down there and intermarrying with Creek and some Cherokee and some Appalachian Indians, and created a whole new tribe of Indians called Seminoles. And the leading candidates and officers in that was black folk running the Seminole Wars that lasted from all the way up from the 1880s all the way up until almost 1850s. Now, when Andrew Jackson took over Florida and marched all the blacks out of there, along with the Indians, what they call the Trail of Tears, nobody tells you. You hear Indians talking about the Trail of Tears. They don't tell you that 30% of all the people in there were blacks. Why were they blacks? If they were runaway slaves, y'all should ask me, well, why didn't the whites grab those slaves and take them back into slavery? Whites didn't want them back. You know why? They were bad ends. Those were bad Negroes. They had been fighting whites down there for 40-something years. They didn't want those blacks back on in the plantations. Those same blacks had ambushed Colonel Dade, that Dade County, Florida's named after, and slaughtered him and his army down just up above Gainesville, Florida. Those blacks had operated Fort Negro on the river down in Apalachicola. That was beating the devil out of white folks until Andrew Jackson sent his army in there and blew the fort up with 375 black women and children in it. And they didn't want those bad blacks back in the boat, so they said, you all stay with those Indians and you go all the way to Oklahoma. But when the record comes out, and you look at the Trail of Tears, there's no blackness. It disappeared. Now, before that, what had happened, all runaway blacks were going where? Contrary to what they keep telling you all, the Underground Railroad did not run north. And I want you all to quit letting people insult your intelligence. Black folk might have been denied an education as slaves, but they weren't stupid. If they're living in the South and Florida is free territory, if they want to escape and go somewhere, they'll run off to Florida a few miles down the road. Why would a barefooted slave in the winter go all the way up to the north in snow and ice, barefooted? See, y'all follow me now? Trying to escape to get into the north, and the north had slavery too. They said, well, Dr. Adams, they could run barefoot up there, they can get across into Canada. Heck, Canada had slavery too. I had blacks swimming the river from Canada trying to swim to Detroit to get free, and I had blacks in Detroit trying to swim the river to get to Canada to get free. Blacks weren't that stupid. They were going to Florida. The Underground Railroad didn't start running north until almost in the 1850s. The Underground Railroad ran north for about 10 years. And those few blacks that went north, they settled around there for a while, and some of them may have gone over to Canada. But again, whites jumped into the picture. You always talk about the abolitionists. There were only a few white abolitionists. Most of the whites were being protected and secreted away by other blacks. But if you go look at the records, it's always about the white abolition, this white abolition. They were few and far and in between. Most of the people that were saving those blacks that decided between 1850 and 1860 to escape through the underground were going off with being helped by other blacks. But again, everybody avoided blackness, and blackness disappeared. And then here comes the Constitution in the 1860s after the Civil War is over. What did they do then? They crafted the 13th, well, the first was the Emancipation Proclamation, then the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment. Why did they write those constitutions? Because you see in 1857, they had a Supreme Court case called the Dred Scott decision that said that those black people have no rights that a white man is bound to respect. Now, when the Civil War ends, here comes the trickery. And watch how they play the game again. Watch how blackness disappeared. They wrote the 13th Amendment. And what they said was those who were enslaved. They didn't say black. They didn't want to use the word black. Black never showed up in the Constitution. And then they wrote the 14th Amendment. They wouldn't use the word black. And the 15th Amendment in 1870 wouldn't use the black. But when the slaughterhouse came up in 1873, and whites tried to use the 14th Amendment, the Supreme Court says no. The 14th Amendment, the 13th Amendment, those 15th Amendments are strictly for black folk. That's the only time they said it. It's strictly for black folk. and cannot be used for anybody else but black folk. That's a Supreme Court decision on a book called the Slaughterhouse Case. And when that case was heard in 1873, whites then said, we need a conspiracy. That's too much blackness. And so the executive branch of government with the president, the Congress, and the legislature with the executive branches all got together and said, let's go back now and whiten and bleach the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment, and pretend that those amendments were written for everybody. If you pretend they were written for everybody, then black folk can't use them. And that's why right now the problems you all got out here with immigration is that everybody coming into the country is using the 14th Amendment for certain rights. Whites now use the 14th Amendment talking about reverse discrimination against them. They captured and stole those laws all by whitening and bleaching them. And they knew that if they whitened and bleaching them, then you all couldn't use them. Because whites say, well, now, if you use the 14th Amendment, if you have an affirmative action program, you're depriving me of my 14th Amendment right. But the Supreme Court decision, Slaughterhouse Case, said those laws were put in place to protect black folk. But no blacks go back and try to use those cases. No blacks go to court and try to make sure that those laws stayed with black folk. And until we go back and recapture the blackness in the 13th, the 14th, and 15th Amendment, you haven't got a snowball's chance of getting all the benefits you need in legal systems all over this country. Now, watch what else happened. Now, what most people don't understand also is that slavery would not have existed in this country if it had not been for the support of American Indians. American Indians sided in with the white power structure in this country to enslave black folk. And every time I go someplace and I mention about the problems of black folk, there's always 2 or 3 black characters that jump up and say, well, Dr. Elson, you're talking about how bad off black folk are. Look at the poor Indians. Indians are not poor. And if they are poor, that's their fault. All the so-called civilized tribes, the Indian tribes of the United States, were slaveholders. They signed treaties with whites to maintain slavery. They get paid $20 to $25 for chasing a black slave down in the woods and bringing him back to this white slave master. All the so-called Indian tribes fought with the South, signed an agreement with the Southern Confederacy to support slavery and to fight the Union. The last one to give up in the war was Stan Wait, a Cherokee general. And the Indians also operated under the same black flag law that the South put on, which says if you see anything black, that's why they had the black flag, said if you catch a black in the Union Army, fight with you on him, it's an instant death. You take no black soldiers as prisoners. They operate what's called a black flag policy. Indians fought with them, and Indians killed more blacks than whites did during slavery. Why? Because they knew that all the blacks working in the fields were unarmed, could not fight back, could not carry weapons because the slave codes of 1705 says a black person could not carry a knife, gun, mirror, anything else. They were unarmed working in the fields. And Indians could come on and kill them anytime they wanted to. And so the Indians were killing as many blacks. They signed treaties, and then when they signed those treaties with whites, whites gave them certain benefits, saying if you side with us, you get benefits. And so in 1750, almost 37% of the population in the United States was black. And if the Indians had sided with blacks, they could have run the whites out of the country. But every treaty then, so whites knew this, they put into every treaty that all the Indian tribes were to stay with whites. And that's why they started calling them civilized. So you get yourself some slaves, own some slaves, get yourself some farms, and you become like us and whites. Whites were never against Indians. What they were saying to Indians was this: you can marry with us, interbreed with us, but you must share some of the land with us. That's why all whites brag about how much Indian blood they had in them. But not one white would brag about how much black blood they got in them. And see, so Indians it was in a special category, stayed in a special category. So now, when the war commenced, and they passed the Emancipation Proclamation, saying that all blacks are free, living in the southern areas outside of the border states. American Indian says that doesn't pertain to us. Those blacks belong to us. That's our blackness. We're going to subjugate that blackness. And all Indians says we are independent, sovereign entities. We don't have to ascribe to the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. And then later on, when the 13th Amendment was written, in 1864, guess what happened then? Indians said the 13th Amendment, freeing blacks doesn't pertain to us. We're going to hold our slaves. All the Indian tribes were holding slaves. And when the Civil War ended and said that all black folk are free, Indians were still holding slaves in the United States. The Choctaw and Chickasaw Indians were holding almost 20,000 blacks still as slaves. And so the United States government then had to go out around the nation to meet with all the various Indian tribes and call them to council and say, look, one thing, we have written the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and now you got to turn those black folk loose. And one of the first big ones at Fort Smith, Kansas, where they had a big collection of Choctaw and Chickasaw, and said, we'll give you $150,000 to turn these black folk loose. And they drew up two Indian treaties. One was called with all the Indian tribes. One was called the Treaty of 1865 and the Treaty of 1866, which says you're going to have to turn these black folk loose. The war is over and they're free, even though the Indians were still holding blacks as slaves. And in those treaties, this is very important for you all because right now the Harvest Institute is in the federal courts right now fighting this for you all. You all have to understand this. In those treaties, this is the first and only instance when they identified some blackness. Those treaties did not talk about minorities. They did not talk about Hispanics, Asians, and Arabs, or midgets, and humpbacks, and lesbians again. They talked about black folk. They said, let me tell you that these black folk must be set free. The black freemen, they are now freemen, or they're mixed with called black Indians. And here are the rules. In these treaties, you must, 1, set all of them free. 2, you must provide them with some of the money we're giving you all. Share the money, split them up with them. 3, you must give them land. 4, you must give them access to all the resources on the reservation. 5, you must give them access to all the benefits we give you all, like Medicare, free college education, and in other resources, housing. 6, they should also be in a exempt status where they don't have to pay taxes. And this has all been handled somewhat also like under the Freedman Bureau. And 7thly, today, they should also be getting some of the money out of casinos. And the Indians gave black folks nothing. They turned against black folk just like whites did, declaring that they saying that we are the native people of this country. And I keep telling black folk, don't listen to that garbage. Go back to that and place your emphasis and importance on your blackness. And you'll be, I tell them, when whites say they are the superior people, and Indians say they are the native people, and Jews say they are the chosen people, you say, I don't care what you call yourself, I am the original people. A substitute can never be better than the original. And that's what those blackness studies are saying now, that when you move away from blackness in Africa, you weaken, you don't get any stronger. And so now, we're suing them in the courts, saying you're going to carry out these mandates or these treaties, and black folk entitled all these benefits they never got. And so we're in the federal claims court, and we've been in there for a couple of years now. A judge recently came back, I think in January, saying, I'm turning down your, I'm denying your case. And here I am with my little institute, with no money except y'all's little money. And I got to fight all the lawyers in the Department of Interior, Department of Justice, and the Indian Bureau, Federal Indian Bureau. They got all these lawyers. Myself, in my little Indian band, black Indians and black freedmen, and one lawyer, and we're fighting. So now we just filed an appeal because we got them. We're back in the courts, back in again. So we're going to go in there and fight. And I understand why they're fighting. Because you see, if we win, the door is wide open for you all. And see, and we're going to win it too. They can't beat us because treaties are constitutionally based. They're based in constitutional law. And we got them locked. And see, and that because it says black freedmen and their descendants and black Indians and their descendants are entitled to all these benefits. And see, Indians all these years and all the Indians' descendants have been getting all these benefits. Blacks have been getting them for the last 140 years too. We got nothing. And so if you all want to start talking about reparations, this is the only instance where you have a legalized justification for reparations. Anything else you're talking about is appealing to old consciousness that white folks don't have. This is it. If we lose this case, you can hang it up. But we got them right now. We got them. And it's in the treaties of 1865 and 1866. And our second case is coming up for the same reason. Because you see, Florida used to belong to Spain. And when the black slaves ran off to Florida, they ran off because the Spanish crown was inviting them to come to Florida because Florida was Spanish territory. And they were saying, come here to Florida, and we would give you land and citizenship in Florida. That's why the first city built in the entire United States was St. Augustine, Florida. It was built by blacks, runaway slaves. And blacks were running off to Florida because they were citizens then. They were Spanish citizens under the Spanish crown. And when the United States, then after the United States destroyed Fort Negro, that a lot of my local supporters have been down there and they've seen it, Fort Negro out in the woods, and most blacks never knew if Fort Negro ever existed because they de-emphasized blackness, and you all don't know all these things. This fort, the remnants of this fort still sits there off the Apalachicola River. And, but they invited black folks then to, what was my point? I got lost there a second. Huh? But yeah, citizen. Yeah, they invited blacks down to get the citizenship out of Florida. And the blacks got there, they started to interbreed and create with Indians and create their own life and their own environment. Then here comes General Jackson, Andrew Jackson. He goes down and illegally invades Florida because the slaveholders said, we want those slaves back. And see, South Carolina was one of the most racist states in the United States. And blacks are running out of Florida, out of South Carolina to get into Florida. So when the first thing the United States did, they created a state called Georgia. They put right underneath Florida to be a buffer between South Carolina and Florida. And they invited Europeans to come over here to live in this country. And so the European states, France, England, Germany, they cleaned out all their mental institutions and their prisons and sent them over here to be residents in Florida, in Georgia, to be a buffer. That's how that came into existence, the state of Georgia, to stop those blacks from running down there. But those blacks that lived in Florida, when they lost the war, when General Jackson came in and invaded the state and killed off a lot of the black women and children, a lot of the black slaves, Spain then sold Florida to the United States for 15 cents an acre. But in the treaty, it's called the Adam and Onis Treaty. In the Adam and Onis Treaty, the treaty said this, that all the inhabitants of Florida are entitled to all the benefits of citizenship of any citizen in the United States, which meant they should have been free and should have been able to hold on to all the land they owned in Florida. And that treaty then was signed by Quincy Adams and ratified by the United States Congress. It became a legal binding document. And the first thing General Jackson did, at the suggestion of the white racists and the slaveholders in Florida that wanted the land, he rushed down there then, got out of the military to become the first governor of Florida. so that he can try to go in there and corrupt the Adam-Onis Treaty that gave black folks all that land and all those resources. And that's how Jacksonville, Florida came into existence. Jacksonville, Florida was named after Andrew Jackson that came in there because blacks owned all the land from Jacksonville, Florida, all the way over to Pensacola. And so y'all need to know all this stuff. And that's another lawsuit that we're into, fighting for all that land. Most of that land in North Florida should have belonged to black folk. And so we're fighting on that. And we'll be in the courts, I guess, for maybe the next 2 or 3 years, fighting for both the 1865 and the 1866 Indian Treaty, also fighting for the support of for the Adam-Onis Treaty. Now, in the meantime, you all need to understand is that black folk in this country are not progressing. So don't let anybody tell you that. In proportional comparative terms, we're where we were in 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, right before we got into all these fights with the Emancipation Proclamations and the 13th and 14th Amendment. At that time, we had approximately 287,000 free blacks in the United States. And those few blacks that were free had managed to acquire 1/2% of this nation's wealth. And now we're in the richest nation in the United States, and after 140 years, you still own and control only 1/2% of the nation's wealth. You have not obtained any more wealth now than you ever had. And contrary to what anybody tells you, it is not your civil rights or integration that gives you power and wealth. It's what you own and control that gives you wealth. Neither does civil rights and integration determines your opportunities. It's what you own and control that determines your opportunities. And right now, we do not own enough wealth to be a significant people. As a matter of fact, the conditions are just the same as they were in 1860. That right now, that black folk in America that have so poor wealth entitlements that the typical white person in the United States has 3,500 times more wealth than the average black person. That in the middle class, that the average white person has 800 to 900 times more wealth than a black person. And for a black female-headed household with 2 children, a white woman has 98 cents for every 2 cents that you have to run a household. We don't own and control any businesses. And so you start talking about, and that's why you have no power. And I see blacks now marching down about the noose and about the lynching stuff. It won't make any difference. The reason you have all this police abuse is because you own and control no wealth and power. That's why they're abusing you. You can scream and have all the marches you want. You can march from now until forever. The reason they keep beating up on us is because we're on the bottom of the feeding chain. We own less than anybody. You don't see them dragging any white women out of cars, beating them, arresting while driving while white women. You don't see anybody pulling out any Jews, beating them while they're Jewish. They don't profile Jews and white women. They're only profiling us. And somebody said, well, Dr. Downs, they're profiling the Hispanics. Yes, they do, and they should. Anytime 5,000 run across the border a day illegally, then they should be profiling them. But blacks are not running across the border, breaking into the country illegally. They said, well, Dr. Downs said they're profiling Arabs. They should be profiling them. If Arabs are going around blowing up airplanes, I want them profiled. If midgets start blowing up airplanes, I want you to profile midgets. You see, but profiling blacks is a waste of time because black folk are not in this country illegally. Black folk are not doing all these other kind of things that people are doing. But see, so therefore we got to understand, we got to go back and get some wealth and power. The police brutalize us because we are silly people. If I go into Detroit, Michigan, and all these black cities, we got all this poverty, all this high unemployment. Guess what the city elected officials do from the mayors and the city councils? They immediately go out and hire white policemen so they can beat up on black folk.
You go get if you're being beaten by a white cop, you're supposed to in a black city, because that's what you hired him for. You gave him the badge, the gun, and the club. You're paying his salary. But I guarantee you won't go to no all-white town and find any white people hiring all black police forces and giving them guns and clubs to beat on white folk. That comes from having silly black leadership. We're losing in the country because we refuse to practice group economics. I tell you right now, across the world, black folk right now make up about 24 to 25% of the world's population. And in the world right now, you got about a 292. And out of that, we control and own less than 1/2 or 1% of it. Even though we make up 24 to 25% of the world's population, we own less than 1/2 or 1% of the world's wealth. Even though God put us in Africa and gave us everything, we still don't own anything. Inappropriate behavior. Don't want to be black. Don't want to develop and produce anything. We in America, as black folk, are 100% consumers and 0 producers. And I got black folk all over the country going around bragging in all these meetings and all these consumer reports, bragging about black folk consumer power. There is no such thing as black consumer power. In a capitalist society, there is no consumer power. That is a weakness. The power is with those who produce, not with those who consume. We're the only people always talking about the black buying power, black consumer power. There is no such animal. That's like going out now, catching some people out in some of these black neighborhoods, a crack peddler, and telling him, you're producing, selling crack, and you're buying and consuming. He's got consuming power. He said, yeah, I sure have. I consume 15 pounds of crack a day. And I'm spending all my money buying crack. Nobody's that silly unless you got a license. You see, they take everything about us and turn it around and make us look stupid because we do all these things. Instead of telling black folk, don't worry about having consumer power, go get some production power. Produce some things. And we have to start practicing group economics. Now, in the world, as I said, right now we're about the 9th richest nation on earth. Because we have an annual disposable income of about $750 billion, but it passes right through our fingers because we don't practice group economics. We're the only people that believe in spending our money with everybody. Everybody. We love that. We're not doctors, we're colorblind. We spend our money with anybody. That's called a displacement of capital and wealth. And you go into all these black communities. Now, when I was in government, we used to watch very carefully what we call balance of trade deficits. That's what Bush has tricked us into. Now we got one of the highest balance of trade deficit on earth. We're borrowing money from Japan and China so we can buy their products. Same thing is true right now with black folk in this country. Black folk right now go down and borrow money so they can buy white goods. So they can go down to Burger Kings and McDonald's and buy things with the money that's borrowed from whites and from white banks. That gives you a balance of trade deficit. Every day when the white trucks come into a white-black neighborhood and drop off products, the rule in economics is that he's supposed to be buying something that's produced locally and taking it back out. Nobody produces anything in the black communities, so we don't sell anything. And we go out and go to everybody else's stores. As soon as we get paid, we run right to a white mall and a white store and spend it. We spend 95% of our money directly into white stores and white malls. We send 3% of our money into Hispanics and Arab stores in the black community. We only keep 2% in our pockets. We only keep 2%. And then we turn around and take that 2% and put it in the white bank and we can't even borrow it or own it. And whites know this. And that time, because now we're down to zero. And that's why white folks, when blacks started demonstrating and marching, when y'all are marching, white folks sit up and laugh at you. They said, look at those blacks out there marching. Don't worry about them, child. Those fools can go bankrupt. When the sun goes down, there's nothing left. When white folks clean out their cash registers and leave the neighborhood, there's nothing left. They're bankrupt every night. Because we don't keep money in our own. And when I had 2 or 3 people come into Washington, D.C., trying to sell products to the Asians up there in Asian town, they went over and tried to sell it to the Asian merchants. And the Asian merchants said, we're not interested. They said, but we'll sell you some of the same products you got on your shelves. We'll sell you some of the same products, and we'll give you a 25 to 30% discount. And the Asians on 8th Street in Washington, D.C. said, we're still not interested. And so one black I know who's a distributor, he said, well, why aren't you interested if we're going to sell you the same products and give you a 25 to 30% discount? He said, aren't you interested? And the Asian said, you all as black folk don't understand. It ain't the money. It's that we will only buy from our own people. It's that only you black folk will buy from any and everybody. And that's why if you go into a black neighborhood in LA, any place else, and see a black store, you will never see a white person get up on a Saturday morning. I've said this before. Get in his car and drive down to a black neighborhood and go to a black store. Get out and go buy something that's produced by a black, being sold by blacks. If y'all ever see it, take a picture of it. It might be valuable. The night is Saturday night. Just watch. In this crowd, I bet you at least 5 or 10 blacks. Watch it. They're gonna go home and call the wife and say, "Baby, I'm coming home. Put on your best dress. I'm taking you out to Chinatown to eat tonight." And I guarantee you would never, ever hear a Chinese man tell his wife that, "Mama Lou, I'm coming home. Put on your best outfit. I'm taking you down to Blacktown." See, they don't do that. We're the only people that spend our money outside of our own community. We refuse to practice group economics. We refuse to practice group politics. So I'm just about to conclude and give you most of my points now, but you got to learn how to play this game. But your strength rests with your blackness. And what I want you to do is quit listening to what people tell you. Don't do what people preach. Don't do what people say and teach. Do what people do. When all these other groups only buy from their own people, you buy from your own people. When they build communities like Chinatown, Frenchtown, Germantown, Polishtown, Greektown, Koreatown, little Cambodia, little Saigon, little Cuba, little Havana, little Italy, you all do the same thing. And buy from your own people and keep your money in your own community and make it bounce 8 to 12 times. Hispanic money in this country bounces 6 to 7 times. White money bounces 8 to 12 times. Arab and Asian money bounces 13 to 14 times. Jewish money bounces 18 times. Black money doesn't bounce once. Keep your money in your own community with your own people and buy from you and support your own people. That is not racist, it's self-survival. It's learning how to survive. And if a black person doesn't have all the stuff you want, go in and buy from him anyway. It's called cost-benefit analysis. Tell you something, I'm going to buy from you, but I'm going to tell you what I want you to do. I'm going to buy it now. Yes, your bread is hard now. It's not as fresh as I want it to be. I'm going to buy it. But I'll tell you what, you got 6 months to come in and clean it up and get a better product. Tell all the other blacks to buy from him. If he doesn't have any money, he can't improve the services and quality of the products. Buy from your people, support them. And the last thing I want to tell you about right now is that we're going to, our seafood operation is up now. And some of you may know about that. we built the first seafood industry in the United States for black folk. Why? Because I want black folk to learn how to build based on their own competitive advantages. Go back to your strength, to your blackness. Black folk right now are some of the strongest people on earth in certain things. We are strong physically. We produce the music of the earth. You know, we are the strongest athletes. We got only a certain kind of hair. Everything that's peculiar to blackness, you must go in and dominate and control it and build businesses around it. You should not be going and let other people taking care of your hair and your nails in your own operation. We buy more leather than anybody else and wear more leather. We should be running the leather industry in the United States. We spend 43% of all the money in this country that's being put on scotch or liquor, for example. I'm not telling you all to drink, but I'm just telling you as an example. We spend about 43% of all the theater ticket money but we don't own not one theater in the country. And in seafood, the reason I went into seafood is because we spend $9 for every $1 whites spend, and we eat 2 to 3 times more seafood than whites. And I said, that's an industry we must learn how to control and build on. So we got our factory up now on the East Coast, and we're up already now. We're already one of the biggest seafood fish producers now in about 2 states. We are going to break ground in about the next 3 or 4 weeks on our second building. The second building goes up, we'll be either number 2 or number 3 biggest fish producer in the entire United States, okay? And the plans after that is that we're going to wait about another 2 years and we'll be doing it. We're going to be enlarging our building, putting up another 280,000 square feet. So what we're talking about is, in terms of space, if you all want to know, that's about 10 or 12 football fields in size. And we raise all of our fish in clean water. No bacteria, no worms, no lead, no mercury, no PCB. If y'all want all that stuff, you got to buy somebody else's fish. We don't have that. And our fish is raised in clean water tanks, same drinkable, potable water, right from the spring water out of the ground. We raise our fish from a minnow to a £1.25 fish in about 7 to 8 months. And we sell our fish into the live fish market. We do not compete with the dead fishes coming into the United States. About 89% of all the fish coming into the United States now is coming in from Latin America or from Asia. Most of it's being raised in sewer water. And they feed it antibiotics and penicillin to keep it alive in sewer water. And they fillet it and ship it into the United States. In Latin America, they raise a lot of their fish in ponds, and they raise the chickens on screen wire over it. And the chicken waste goes down, and that's what the fish eat and stay alive off of. And they send that fish into the United States. They spray it, what they call it gassing. That's the term they use. They take CO2 and spray it and make it look red and fresh. And they sell it in the supermarkets all over the United States. Our fish would be fresh fish. It'll be under the brand of Waterland Fisheries. And we're up and running. And as I said, we're going to be expanding, and we hope to be one of the biggest in the world. When we open up the third one, it's other 280,000 square feet within about another 2.5 years. We'll be the biggest fish producer in the world at that point. And this will be the first time in the history of the world since we left Africa that black folk have a chance to dominate on blackness. And you see, and that's dominating. Yes, black folks have produced magazines, but they never were the dominant magazine producers. Yes, Motown produced records, but they weren't the biggest and the dominant. This will be the first time in the world that you all have a chance to dominate and control. And remember, own and control is the key. Don't waste your time talking about what you can have access to. Having access to something ain't worth a quarter. That's what social integration was about, giving you all access. Access is like a bank clerk. A bank clerk right now is a white-collar job that's some of the lowest paying money in the country. But again, a bank clerk has access to other people's money, but they don't take a penny home with them at night. And because having access is no good, it's who owns and controls the money that runs that bank and has the power and wealth. I love all of y'all, and one last thing is that if you all feel up to it, we're going to need a lot of money for this lawsuit, where we're into these 2 lawsuits on you all's behalf. This is the only form of reparation you all going to ever get, in my estimation, because it's law based in the Constitution of those treaties. If you all want to give something to Harvest Institute, we appreciate it. If you don't, I'll keep spending my little pennies and doing the best I can for you. I love all of you, and thank you for coming out.